Greetings, greetings of peace and love. I'm Reverend Lori Cardona. I'm here with Reverend Lisa Benton, aka Gotti Lisa. We're here to discuss and dig deep a presentation that was done last week through my podcast, Miracles with a Twist. We look forward to this discussion and we look forward to being connected heart to heart, soul to soul. And we do that by starting out with a prayer. Let's take a nice deep breath in. And when we exhale, we put our hand on our hearts. We press in a little bit so we can feel our heartbeats. We give thanks for this opportunity to be together, to listen closely to the word of spirit and to understand how it inspires us to do better and be better, to rise higher, to love steadily and forgive readily. In these days, we feel very committed to living a peaceful life. And so we move forward with that intention every morning as we start our day. We see each other with eyes of love, and we speak consciously words of compassion and kindness. We're here to stand in the gap, to repair the tear, and to bring light into the world. And for that very noble task, we give thanks. And let's take another nice deep breath in. And exhale into this moment, feeling grounded, feeling loved. Hello, Gotti Lisa.
Hello, Rev Lo. It's so wonderful to see you.
Thanks, likewise.
And it was wonderful to see you floating down Middle River there on Thursday. That was beautiful.
Great location.
Absolutely beautiful.
Middle River, Wilton Manors, Florida.
Yep, it just was beautiful. It actually looked quite professional, I must say. It just neat. And when I got the video, it looked like a portrait almost of you with the river behind you. So it was very neat. And it was extremely inspiring for me. First of all, I fell in love with the whole aesthetics. Okay.
Yeah.
And of course,
been getting a lot of good feedback on that.
It was great. And what you were putting out there was really interesting because, as usual, but it was because for me, I was more focused on the majesty of what I was looking at. Not saying I wasn't listening, because I was listening, but I was absorbing all of it. So, and what resonated with me, and you even mentioned it in the opening prayer, is gaps, cracks, things like that, you know, and how we can stand in the gaps. Actually, lesson was, I am the light of the world. And so what better way, you know, to fill a gap than with light and love, right? Yes. So I'm looking at all of this, and you gave some beautiful quotes from diverse people, and it was just so beautiful, but it was all about, you know, these cracks that we have and these gaps. You mentioned in the very beginning a painting called Checkmate, but this gentleman had noticed that it was one move prior to checkmate. So we kind of, there's always like some kind of gap. And so there's just so many gaps to fill, and to kind of refer back to the signs that we talked about last week. I believe it was last week or maybe the week before. Signs, there's signs everywhere. And there's always the opportunity to fill in the gap, to stand in there, to be the light of the world. And I should say, not but, again, I come back to where I was watching this whole thing unfold in this beautiful presentation. And I got to thinking about how we are not born into a gap. We are born full of no gaps. We're loving, light, perfect creations, and we start creating these little gaps.
We do.
And then we got to start looking for them so that we can fill them with what is real, which is love and light.
Yes.
And so I really, the funny thing that came to me of all things, here I am, floating down the river, listening to you talk, giving these great quotes, going, yes, this is so beautiful and all that, the whole thing. What comes to me is Rocky 1. I am a big fan of the Rocky series. I have my favorites, and I have questionable feelings about some of them. But Rocky 1, truly the best. And Rocky.
I agree.
And Rocky and so you probably remember this. Rocky and Paulie. Rocky used to beat the meat where Paulie worked, and he used to go in there and beat the hell out of it all the time. And Paulie had some real issues. He was kind of a very unpleasant person, and he was Adrian's brother, and he was kind of cruel, and I think he was kind of jealous because Adrian and Rocky were obviously liking each other. So he's like, what do you like about her? What do you see in her? And he goes, she's got gaps. I got gaps. We fill each other's gaps. I just thought that's what came to my head as I'm watching this beautiful river and you talking about cracks and gaps and filling these spaces and all that. And I'm thinking of Rocky. And so here's Rocky in this meat locker with this nasty Paulie explaining love so beautifully,
right?
And so simply.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are, and for him it came out, and Rocky wasn't presented as the most brilliant person in that movie. I understand Sylvester Stallone is a Mensa guy, he writes well, but anyway, it just, the whole thing made me think we are living in the gap. We just don't know it until we see these signs where the gaps are. And when we sit back and we allow these gaps to be filled with light and love, or to have the darkness shine through, it is just so beautiful. We can live on that river. And so that is really what spoke to me, was the fact that we create these gaps and then we spend our time, and we must, because we do create these gaps, we must look closer for them so that we can fill them, stand in them, be the light in them, and go back, remember things that we've forgotten, that we are the light of the world. And so that picture, if there's any way of making a still or something from your video, you really ought to make a still, and I am the light of the world, or filling the gaps, whatever. It was just beautiful, and I want to thank you for that. And it's a good reminder for me that we live in this beautiful state. You and I, even though we live at opposite ends of the state, it's a beautiful state. And and we know beautiful people, and we know people that get on our nerves, and we should be on that river all the time, whether we're with somebody who gets under our skin or somebody that we just can't wait to be with, and be in the flow. And if you look at the picture, you actually see the water flowing. It looked like the tide was either coming in or going out or whatever, but it was flowing. Somebody couldn't have produced a better video.
Thanks.
So there you were in the flow, talking about reality, with reality on Earth and things we need to do to be in the real world, which is that beautiful river flowing and the trees and all that.
Mm.
And I found, amazingly enough, I'm just going to take a minute to do this, a second or a few seconds if I can find it, that there's a lot of people that have things to say just about this. And I found Rumi said the wound is where the light enters, and we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
Ralph Waldo Emerson said there is a crack in everything God has made. Leonard Cohen, the crack is where the light gets in. This is interesting. Blessed are the cracked, for they shall be let in the light. That's Groucho Marx. And only the wounded physician heals, and that's Carl Jung. So, I mean, the stuff on these cracks and gaps in our lives and being filled with always love, light, it's the only way that these cracks get filled and or are released. And so thank you very much for that beautiful picture. And it was really neat for me to be able to absorb the aesthetics of the presentation at this same time as I was intellectually listening to what you were saying and absorbing that. It was like living it. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to my dear friend, Maria Albury. She lives, her house is on that dock. And I originally was sitting in a different area and she said, but look over here. And I was like, whoa, wow, I almost missed that beautiful view. So it was thanks to her that I set up down there on the lower level of her dock that's on her property. So yeah, standing in the gap, and I'm glad you brought up Rocky and Adrian. Was it?
Yeah.
Adrian? Yeah. I couldn't. And yeah, that whole thing. And it's because sometimes we think in terms of big historical or religious stories, and it's like, well, how can I do that? And we do it in person. We do it in personal relationships. We do it through our personal relationships. It's not like we're going to save the entire outer world. It's about what we do with our inner world and how we interact with others. That was a great analogy because the gap is often caused by us, maybe through some disruption or some disagreement. When you think in terms of just having an argument with someone that's an ego-based argument. I want to be right, you want to be right.
Right.
It's created a gap and your heart has turned away. And in the Sufi tradition, they say that our hearts, it's symbolic. Our hearts turn according to our mood. So if we're angry with someone, our hearts are turned away. And when we're connected, our hearts turn back toward that person. Beautiful. But imagine when it's turned away, it's creating a gap. So I love the idea of remembering that the biggest gap is the one that we create between ourselves and others, because it's sometimes it's easier to be easy breezy with the world outside. I can be nice to somebody at the Publix, while still being mad at the person I left in the car. So that's really the gap. That's the gap right there. So it's a consciousness. And it's a conscious decision on a daily basis to say, you know what, I'm going to be walking out there. There's going to be bumps on the road. There's going to be detours and there's going to be gaps. And I got to remember my part, because I've made a commitment to this part. And, alhamdulillah and hallelujah. We've got ordination coming up this week, and we're ordaining people to sacred service. And what is sacred service other than making a conscious decision on a daily basis to be of service from your heart? Not just to hand out water bottles. That's easy. To be of service from your heart is to really stretch your consciousness, to stretch whatever is within you when you are personally hurt or bothered or judgmental, or carrying on about something or anything. In fact, I was listening to a great discussion that Ram Dass made years and years and years ago, and I'm going to use that. I think I'm going to be talking more about that on the next Miracles with a Twist, and then we can talk about it further. But it's really all about, who do we put on the altar? Who do we put on the altar other than the deities that are easy to love, but those who are not so easy to love? And if we're finding it difficult to love someone, we've created a gap. And so we have to remember our part in standing in that gap that we've created, or that has been created in some way, on a human level. So thank you for the reminder. I think Rocky was a great example, and there's plenty of examples that.
Well, it looks like we're experiencing a little technical difficulty. I have lost my buddy here. I think what I'll do is just end with a little thought. And if she comes back before I'm done, then that's cool. So this is from Annie Dillard. I found her online, and she's talking about gaps. Go up into the gaps. If you can find them, they shift and vanish too. Stalk the gaps. Squeak into a gap in the soil. Turn and unlock more than a maple, a universe. This is how you spend this afternoon and tomorrow afternoon. Spend the afternoon.